The British Rail Class 58. What, immediately? Why are you here? Why are you always here? What is the matter with you? Why must you insert yourself into everything I do? I'm not even British. I'm an American. Is this some kind of payback for the whole revolution thing? You know what? I wasn't even alive then. You can't do this to me. The Class 58, which is nicknamed the Bone by rail enthusiasts, was a diesel-electric locomotive that was manufactured by the British Rail Engineering Limited as well as Doncaster Works between 1983 and 1987. They only produced 50 of them, and from the get-go, they do look kind of funny. The cabs themselves are fairly standard as far as British diesels go, but what's with that midsection? Why is it so square? It looks like there's a bunch of little doors, and that's by design. See, the Class 58 was almost an experiment incorporating an American practice, and you're welcome by the way, of modularization. Effectively, the Class 58 is just the British take on a hood unit, where maintenance is made incredibly easy by making every system possible on board the locomotive modular, able to be taken out and replaced entirely, and it was honestly very good. The Class 58 was pretty good at what it did, with the only issue found was that climate control systems in the cab weren't effective when the locomotive was going at high speeds, but this was quickly rectified and there were no other main issues. And in fact, crews loved it. The maintenance techs adored them because they were easy to work with, and their cabs actually set the standard for a lot of future diesel designs because they were so comfortable and easy to work with for the drivers. So why are they no longer in service, I bet you're wondering? Well, that's due to a few factors. One factor involved a miners' strike. They were meant to pull coal trains, and the miners decided to pull a strike, so they couldn't do that. The British Rail had to redesignate them on basically every freight train they possibly could. Additionally, British Rail was accused of ordering too many of them because their parts to construct them were already on order anyway, which meant they had too many of the units for the amount of work they actually needed. Additionally, when privatization happened, the 58s came under the ownership of the English, Welsh and Scottish Railway, or EWS, now known as DB Cargo UK. And for whatever reason, they just didn't like them, at all. They wound up withdrawing them in 2002 after only 19 years of service. Some of them were scrapped, 5 are currently in preservation, however 36 wound up being exported to France and Spain. And some believe that EWS's decision to export the class was an incredible waste because these weren't bad locomotives at all. They did their jobs quite well. And apparently the UK suffered a shortage of available locomotives in the mid-2010s, and had these not been exported, they could have helped alleviate some of those problems. But, you know, corporate mismanagement ruins all nice things, as we all are well aware of. And why the heck did British Rail find its way on a weird list? Most of your diesels are pretty normal. This is like the one that's a bit odd. And it's good. You just ordered it when you didn't need that many. And then you got privatized. And then the EWS is like, no, we don't want those. And then they actually needed them. And you can't get them back now. Like, what? I don't know what's going on over here. Guys, UK, my audience, are you all alright? I'm just checking. Are you guys okay? Like, really? I just want to know. Blink once for yes, blink twice for no. Coffee pot locomotives. Okay, what in the heck is that thing? This is an excellent question. Manufactured in 1871 by Head Wrightson for the Dorking Greystone Lime Company, this is it's basically a tank engine, but they were called coffee pots because, well, look at them. Though to be honest, the design isn't that weird. I mean, it does look odd compared to what we think of when we think of a steam locomotive, but it's not that far off from our first steam locomotive here in America, the Tom Thumb. What I bet you're wondering, how was this itty-bitty thing successful? I mean, it's so tiny. And yeah, it's small, sure, but that doesn't mean it wasn't good at what it did. It was efficient, and it was only ever meant to work at the Betchworth Quarry, pulling small trains with small loads at low speeds. And for that purpose, it was exceptional. And not being super complicated to operate, because the quarry workers were quarry workers, they were miners, they were trained to mine stuff. Their training wouldn't have encompassed steam locomotive operation, so it had to be as simple as possible, so pretty much anybody could have used it with a basic overview. While there were a handful of coffee pots, number one specifically put in a lot of work. Remember, it was manufactured in 1871. It was not withdrawn until 1952. Over 80 years this little coffee pot was trucking around, and in 1960 it was in derelict condition when it was purchased by Head Wrightson. It was moved to Thornaby, where it joined number 21 and number 33, and they actually wound up restoring number 1 to some level of operation, though initially it only ran on compressed air. In 2006, a major restoration project was started to restore the locomotive to steam, which it finally did again in 2010. It's currently operational at the Beamish Museum, which is pretty impressive for such a little guy, don't you think? The Susp. Okay, what the heck is that? I don't even know where to begin. In fact, you wouldn't even recognize that as a type of train if I hadn't told you it was, because it is. But, what's going on here? Okay, I'll explain. The Susp, which is also known as the Swiss Vernacular, or Stanzebahn Scheiss Stus? Yes, did I hit it? Switzerland, confirm. Did I pronounce all that correctly? No, of course I didn't. The Susp is a vernacular railway, which is a railway system that operates off of a system of cables, and they're pretty much always used to navigate steep slopes. The line is actually a total of 1.7 kilometers, or 1.1 miles, which is pretty long by vernacular standards, but this thing goes up a very steep slope. The maximum gradient here is 110%, or 47.7 degrees, and it's the steepest vernacular railway in Switzerland, and Europe for that matter. Some people consider it the steepest in the world, but technically speaking, the Katoomba Scenic Railway in Australia is steeper, with a maximum gradient of 122%, but it uses a winch system. And so, technically speaking, it would be an incline lift and not a vernacular railway, which would mean that Stutzbahn is the steepest vernacular. Technically. Argue about that in the comments. We're not going to get into that, but man, does this look funny. I mean, vernaculars are usually, box-shaped, go up and down, but this one was designed in an admittedly very creative way. Because you're probably wondering why the carriages on this thing, those little round bits, are, well, round. Why does it look like that? And no, it's not just a stylistic choice. See, as the Stutzbahn goes up the gradient, the round carriages actually rotate on their own due to gravity. Most of their weight is in their floors, so because of the gravitational pull, they'll always rotate towards the Earth and therefore always maintain a level surface regardless of how steep of a gradient the Stutzbahn is going up. It's simple, but elegant, and actually quite ingenious. I love the idea. This is a fairly recent weird train. It only opened in 2017, but I kind of look forward to seeing others duplicate the design because I find the idea quite appealing myself. And speaking of Switzerland, the Swiss Federal Railway's Class E 3/3 electric steam modification. Okay, what the heck is going on here? That is a tank engine, and that is a pantograph, and those are electric lines. Why? What? Huh? I don't... Huh? Very rarely has electricity and steam power mixed, because when you think about it, it actually makes zero sense. If you're in a position where you can't make steam power from coal or wood or something else, and you have to use electricity, well, why not just make it an electric locomotive by default? You're adding a bunch of other steps and overcomplicating things. Electric locomotives can be just as powerful as steam locomotives. It's possible. So on the surface, there's really no benefit here, except for a unique situation that Switzerland found themselves in during the Second World War. See, when the war broke out, Switzerland did what they always do and remained neutral. And they actually got most of their coal from Germany. Switzerland has no natural reserves of coal, so they had to. But as the war dragged on, the price of importing German coal kept rising. For reasons I don't think I need to explain, but the answer is they were losing and needed the coal for themselves. Switzerland was also in a position where they couldn't actually manufacture any new electric locomotives. Though they had some, they needed more rolling stock, and they had a bunch of steam engines kicking around, but with the coal prices as high as they were, it was impossible to make them efficient unless they utilized the fact that they just had a ton of pantograph lines around and modified two tank engines, both Class E 3/3s, 8521 and 8522, with pantographs. Through some clever design work, they could use the electricity to actually heat the steam boilers. This meant that the engines didn't actually need to use coal at all, although they did retain their fireboxes as an extra heat source just in case. Additionally, once they built up full pressure, they could actually operate without the pantograph lines, therefore no heat source, for about 20 minutes, which would have been long enough for some light shunting duties. They were incredibly useful modifications, but only because of the unique situation that Switzerland was stuck in at the time. Once the war ended and Switzerland regained access to cheap coal, the electric heaters were removed, 1951 for 8521 and 1953 for 8522. As of 2013, 8522 is still in museum service on the Susp Triengen Railway as an ordinary steam locomotive, no electric heater attached. The Shea. Oh, I'm so excited! Shays are actually one of my favorite locomotive types, but let's be fair, if you've never seen one before, they look incredibly bizarre. Like, what is going on here? The pistons are going up and down, and there's the side spinny thing, and the what? Where are we? What is this thing? Okay, backstory. Ephraim Shea was the inventor of the Shea locomotive, as the name might imply. The Shays were designed to fill a very specific niche in terms of rolling stock technology. What you are looking at is a type of geared steam locomotive. Geared locomotives are different from regular steam locomotives in that their power output does not go to their wheels directly. Instead, it goes through a gearing system, the layout of which varies between types. There's Heislers, there's Climaxes, there's a few others, but the Shays are arguably the most successful version of this particular design ethos. But why would you want to do that? Well, that's because the Shea was meant for logging, mining, and other small industrial operations that took low speed but high tractive effort. The one thing pretty much all geared steam locomotives have in common is they're usually pretty slow. Their top speed might reach 30 miles per hour, maybe. But that's irrelevant because they were never meant to go very fast, because to make up for their lack of speed, their tractive effort, their ability to pull heavy things, is ludicrous. Shays were capable of pulling an insane amount of weight for their size. There were several different versions of the Shea, Class A, Class B, Class C, and Class D. The Class A's only had 2 cylinders, but from B and beyond, they were given 3 cylinders, and Class C and Class D each added an additional truck to them to make it easier for them to go around corners. Because that was the other thing about Shays, that they were designed for mining operations, particularly in the mountains. For one thing, they could pull a tremendous amount of weight, yes, but they could also do it upgrades that regular steam locomotives would never have tolerated. They could handle grades of up to 6%, and consider for a moment that for a normal steam locomotive, a 3% grade is considered very steep. 6% is double that, and the Shays could handle that with heavy loads behind them. They were also very heavy, but remarkably stable. This was helpful because often the rails they ran on weren't laid by professional track layers. They were laid by miners or woodcutters, and those guys just weren't trained in track laying, so the lines tended to be a little shaky. But the Shays were able to go over rough lines, and in the event they did derail, they were actually pretty easy to put back on the tracks, making these locomotives a godsend for rural operations of a wide variety. They were exported to a handful of countries, but they really are best known for their work in North America. They also saw an insane amount of preservation, probably down to how unique they were and also how successful. 115 Shays survived into preservation, and they're located in various places, and a handful are actually still in service in Indonesia, believe it or not. The best place I've ever been to see these locomotives is the Cass Scenic Railroad located in Cass, West Virginia. All their rolling stock are actually geared locomotives. They have a Heisler and a Climax, but they have quite a number of Shays, including the largest Shea ever built and the last one built, number 6, who was a big girl at 162 short tons. I've been down there myself, and I personally vouch for the railroad's quality. It's quite a nice ride through the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, and I'd recommend it for any rail enthusiast, especially if you've never seen a Shea before. They're peculiar, but phenomenal pieces of design. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.